just everyday organization on just some basic things of life just made me crazy. And the emotional dysregulation around it is, why can't I get this? What's my problem? And so that has been reduced greatly. The meds and the tools that I've learned here in the community and been applying has helped a lot. But then there are still these places that I feel like, darn it, here it is again. But it feels like it feels to me like I'm bumping against a glass ceiling.
ADHD Rewired, episode 301. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. And you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hey everyone, sorry that there was not a podcast in your podcast feed last week. I was sick with the flu, and if you happen to have gotten this year's flu and you felt like me, you would understand. I ended up in the hospital on Friday. Did you know that you can get dehydration from a fever? That's why there wasn't a podcast last week. I was home all week, sick as hell. So I am back. I am feeling 88% back. The podcast that you were about to hear today, which is a mastermind session, during those two sessions, we're going to bring you the first one today, recorded these back to back. I was starting to get sick like during that moment. So my head maybe wasn't 100% in it. Wasn't feeling super well, but that's what you're about to hear. I think you'll enjoy anyways. Some really interesting topics. This is the first of two that we recorded on the first day. We may or may not take another week off before the year is over. So just be aware of that. And without any more rambling, here is a mastermind session. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We have some mastermind sessions that are going to be coming to you now. And this is our first session of 3 or 4, 2. I don't know. We have a couple mastermind sessions that you're going to be hearing over the next several weeks. And first, we have Tena, who is going to be in the hot seat talking about emotional dysregulation. So we have our ARC 18 admin. ARC is ADHD Rewired Coaching, the 18th season. So we have Tena and we have Roxy. Hi, Roxy.
Hello.
And we have Will.
Hello, hello.
Will Curb. And we have Aggie.
Hi.
All right. And I think probably all of these voices you've heard before, if you've been listening to the podcast. And if you are brand new to the podcast and this is your very first episode, this is something that we do periodically, where we dive in and do an actual mastermind session, where a mastermind is where we take a topic that someone is having and or an issue that someone's having, and we do a deep dive into that and help that person find some clarity, some answers through asking questions, throwing out ideas, and then asking that person to make some commitments, which is why we call it the hot seat. So, Tena, are you ready to kind of share with us what sort of the nature of your hot seat is around emotional dysregulation?
Well, as I have been active and more in the ADHD community, the adult ADHD community, ADHD Rewired, I have become more aware that emotional dysregulation is affecting my life. And I didn't really recognize it as that prior. I just thought I got pissed quick. So now I realize that that's really emotional dysregulation, and that maybe it can be handled and the triggers can be recognized and potentially, hopefully not maybe stopped per se, but possibly a cog put in the wheel of it so that it doesn't escalate. And sometimes for me, it's agitation over things that I really already knew were coming.
Can you share some examples?
Well, yesterday is a perfect example. I'm an eBay seller. I had a very large item. It needed a big box. It needed a really big box. I didn't have said big box, even though I had item listed. So that means it's going to sell. It did. This shouldn't have been a surprise, nor having the packing materials to do that.
What about example? So what about that particular example? Like, what comes up for you when that happens? Like, what's your understanding of it? Why that gets you so upset?
Because I'm like, duh, you knew you had this listed. Why don't you have the box? Why didn't you have the box when you listed this thing that was big and heavy and awkward? Suitcases, amplifiers, turntables. You guys get the picture.
So is it you're getting upset because you're shitting on yourself?
Well, I'm shitting on myself a little bit, but that I don't process it out far enough when I'm doing a task.
Okay.
That then it causes the emotional dysregulation. That I probably should be processing the task further in the initial stage.
Okay.
And sometimes, and I found that, so I'll use another example. We just moved across the country.
Mm-hmm.
My husband started planning a year in advance. 3 weeks, 4 weeks before we left.
He's neurotypical, right?
Sort of. More. Sort of. He'll have a folder and he'll be preparing and it will be checked off. Okay. He came downstairs and said, you really have to pack this. Like, you're moving and it's got to get packed. And I kind of look at him and go, yeah, there isn't much. There's only 3,400 items.
Okay. So I want to come back to the not having the box. Because I'm curious if part of this is, so one of the things I know for myself that I recognize as like something that will, the proportion to the agitation to the situation just doesn't match when I am interrupted in the middle of doing something. And so I'm wondering if for you that agitation is because the thing has to get done and now you're going to have to go out and get something for that task, which could potentially just derail you completely.
That's a piece of it, but it's also the poor planning.
Okay.
The just not planning it. I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
No, I think you are. What are your guys' questions or thoughts?
My first initial thing is also to think about things that led up to the situation before then. Like, I know my emotional regulation is severely compromised by sleep, food, and hydration. And hydration, I think, is the one that like catches me off guard the most, because I'm like, all of a sudden at the end of the day, I'm like, I am grumpy about everything. And I'm really thirsty. Why am I really thirsty? Oh, I haven't had anything to drink since, 4 hours ago. And it's like, oh, that's something that I wouldn't have considered to be, regulating my emotions. But your like physical well-being has a huge part in how you feel during. And so that can lead me to be like, oh, instead of just being slightly things, then I just like start jumping. My anger starts jumping way more.
Do you drink enough water?
I don't drink hardly any water. When he said hydration, I went, what? What? It's a thing?
Yeah, I'm not great at drinking water either, and I try, and it really helps. I mean, it's amazing how much better my brain functions when I am drinking enough water. Like I should just call it like Adderall substitute. Because it really is like, keeping your brain hydrated. It's, would you go 15,000 miles on a car without an oil change?
Oh, me? Absolutely not.
That's kind
no, because my car's
doing.
going to 400,000 miles, and we're friends. Oh no, she gets petted.
Well, you have a big smirk on your face. What's
just when you said it's an Adderall substitute, Tina was just like, her face was just like, no, that can't possibly be that important.
That's right. Will knows me pretty well. You're like, what? Surprised? I'm really taking this in. I'm taking in that whole concept of that these other factors really may play in to as much as the situation, the small, annoying.
Did Roxy, Will, and Aggie, did you also hear the shouldy thought in the setup of you should know how to do this? You shouldn't be missing this step and be in this position.
There was a note in here, sensing a potential compassion deficit. And then with acceptance, there was a question there about wondering where you would say you are on a 1 to 10 scale of your acceptance just of having ADHD, and wondering what acceptance looked like for you.
I have worked on my ADHD pretty logically. And so the emotional component has not probably been as addressed to get to a healthier place in and around it. As you know, I wasn't diagnosed until I was 52 in the middle of a horrible IRS audit that my CPA figured out I had ADHD. Thought I should see someone. She was spot on. And so I'm kind of pragmatic, and I said, okay, well, if that is, let's get some help and let's find out some things. And then there was a couple other events that actually is how I found the community and heard Eric for the first time. And, but yeah, probably, I think there's some stuff around that hasn't been fully explored yet.
So you've been managing your ADHD for how long?
8 years, 9 years.
Okay. And so the majority of your life, you did not know that you had ADHD?
No, I knew I saw things differently and went about them differently. And school was not extremely successful for me. Actually, I came out with a lot of information because I had a book in a book most of the time.
You had a book in a book, meaning you were reading something else that you're...
Yes. I think Mrs. Ritchie's gone now, so we can say it out loud. I think she's passed.
So when you say you've been managing your ADHD, tell me what that's looked like for the last 8 years.
Well, until I came to my first coaching group, I basically took meds, took them every day, and didn't really dive into the other tools in the basket. I didn't really know there were some.
Yeah.
And then and I think I've told Eric this, maybe you guys all have heard this, but I had met a lady who got diagnosed late as well, and it blew her out. And I was like, which I thought was interesting.
What do you mean by blew her out?
She just couldn't even deal with the fact or thought that she might have it, and didn't, for just a variety of reasons, couldn't share it openly in her situation, and just a variety of things. But her response was very different than my own. And I thought, that's really interesting. This is more complicated than I thought. There is more to this adult ADHD than I realized at all. Far more complicated. And every day I'm here, I recognize that how much I don't know yet. And
just to give you some maybe context too, obviously I do this professionally. I've known I've had ADHD for coming on 20 years now. Started really trying to manage it for aggressively the last 10 years. So the last 15 years. And there is still, on probably a yearly basis, there is one thing that I didn't really realize, and that ADHD was impacting my life in a certain way. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm dealing with that too. I don't, how did I not see that? Right. And so that's why self-compassion is like, you can't move forward with this stuff without self-compassion. It's almost, in some ways, like we're talking about taking off the armor, but self-compassion is the armor that allows you to move forward. Right. So it's this paradoxical, sort of thing we need to hold, and it's holding ourselves in a self-compassionate way, right? And knowing that we are doing our best with what we understand in this moment, with the skills and the tools that we have available. And when we know better, we will try to do better. So that's why when we look at scenarios like you described with your not having the materials to ship this one item, say, okay, likely something like this will possibly happen again. What can I do now? So I am putting in place sort of fail safes that will decrease the chances or the frequency of something like that happening again.
I've been able to do the compassion, sort of as you just described it, around parenting and giving that back to my parents as well, who have both passed. But really, I've always felt that they did the very best they could with what they had at the time, and would have done differently had they known things as well. And I've tried to pass that forward to my adult son and to myself. But I think I have missed it in other areas of life.
Aggie, well, Roxy, what are your...
Yeah. Tina, I really identify with a lot of what you're saying. But I thought it was really interesting that when you were talking about your move and your husband came downstairs, you shot off like that you had 3,400 items, like to the T. I would be like, I don't know how much shit is in here. I think it's going to take an hour. It's going to take 12, but you like knew exactly. So I think it just points out that like there's patterns that we've been doing that are working for the right reasons and working for the wrong reasons. And those ones that are covered up take a while to come out because they've been working for one reason or another. And then when I think about your late diagnosis, I'm like, there's so much like more like backing that up than now. So having self-compassion around that part specifically, and like you're really brilliant. So a bunch of things were working for you. But I think that this is just one of those that some of these other like checklists and outer accountability pieces that kind of were supposed to start early on. I lack in that too. I know that environmentally I need a checklist for everything, but I'm getting there. So I don't have a good summarizing sentence at the end of this, but
checklists.
There you go. Very nice. Roxy, did you have something?
Tag teaming off of what Aggie said, I also thought about checklists and was wondering if maybe you just kept a piece of paper and a pen with you as you were going about the packing up process, and you were able to get really granular about exactly what you were doing. I'm grabbing this size box for this item. I'm using this packing, just breaking it down to the most annoyingly detailed, and then being able to work on willingness to grab the check sheets and refresh your memory as you're taking those things to the UPS store or whatever.
Roxy, that's really good, because those are also the things that are needed to have the help that would be needed in growing or, So if I had somebody that would pull my items and ship them for me, because none of that is written anywhere.
And I know when you were doing real estate, you had a team of people that were helping you.
Yes. I always had a team. I had my title folks that I always worked with, my assistant who was virtual. Yes.
Would you say that during that, in that domain, that prevented a lot of the emotional sort of dysregulation based on like not having to deal with challenges that another set of eyes would have seen?
Yes, that really helped. And the very nature of a real estate transaction, because it is dated, time stamped, and has everything has a very specific date and time and an out date. And so because it was already planned for me, it was a straighter path. But in the property management, because I did both sides of that industry, wasn't quite as good because there was no in date and out date. You brought the property in and then you just worked the process. But because there's no hard dates, it was much harder for me to put those in place.
Roxy, did you have another comment or question?
I was just thinking about how we're talking a lot about emotional dysregulation, but I was wondering if we laid that groundwork as much as we can. I'm kind of curious, like how it shows up for her. And I don't feel like I fully grasp it. I know that there's some anger around not feeling like you're planning, but I would like
where else does it show up?
How it shows up. Mm-hmm.
It shows up when I feel like I have the glass ceiling. And I felt that I felt that all the time before I was on meds and before I was diagnosed. I didn't know what caused that in my life, but it was like I couldn't pull it back to go higher in my career and all kinds of things. That just everyday organization on just some basic things of life just made me crazy. Because it was just, I felt like the emotional dysregulation around it is, why can't I get this? What's my problem? And so that has been reduced greatly. The meds and the tools that I've learned here in the community and been applying has helped a lot. But then there are still these places that I feel like, darn it, here it is again. But it feels like it feels to me like I'm bumping against a glass ceiling.
All right. So when you bump against the glass ceiling, what happens emotionally? Like, it seems like the circumstances are kind of the ceiling. You can't get past the circumstances that are holding you back. But the emotional dysregulation, what happens in your body and in your mind when that happens?
I get angry, and I think my self-talk is very negative. I think I struggle with that.
Well,
I know one of the hardest things I have with emotional self-regulation is that when I lose my shit, I get so mad at myself for losing my shit. Like, that's the hardest place, where I'm just like, I should be better than this, which is, me shooting all over myself. But that's probably the hardest place I get hit, is just, I'm like, then I spiral, and, that's where it's really hard to come back from, is being like, I don't have a good answer for telling myself it's okay to have lost my shit, but that's the only solution I can see moving forward right now.
One of the things that I find to be helpful, because Will, I so related to that, getting mad at yourself that you got mad about something. Yep. This is when we talk about, that shame doesn't like to be spoken, right? Like, talking to other people about, like, what's the script of your itty bitty shitty committee, right? Like, what is it saying it out loud, and getting those people that know you to like talk you off the ledge a bit and remind you of all the positive things you actually are doing. Because I think, I know I need those reminders sometimes, right? I can get into some negative self-talk myself, right? But I also know when I'm in that space, like, I need to not keep it in my head. I need to talk to somebody about it. And, have that sometimes we don't look at ourselves with self-compassion, and we need somebody else journey with us in those moments, to help us have more self-compassion with those moments, and to remind us that we're doing like 90% of stuff really well, right? And it's hard when 10% of the stuff doesn't go the way you want it to, right? And it's like, yeah, but I just want to focus on that 10%. It's almost, in some ways, it feels almost like a compulsion in some ways, I think, that to focus on that negative piece. Which is why I think it's really important to have very intentional approaches and things that we can do to remind ourselves of the positive that we're doing. I mean, you just moved, you closed a business, and you're already back up and operational.
I was operational in 2 weeks.
Of like 34,000 items?
3,400.
3,400? That's still a lot. That is still.
But I still had to be able to. But we didn't reinvent the wheel. Everybody went right back to their spots. I mean, just the fact that you didn't reinvent the wheel, is amazing, because I think we like to reinvent the wheel. I mean, that's because it's like, let's do something different. And you had enough wisdom to know, that wouldn't make sense. Let's do what works, And so the good news is, because you have that very logical approach to stuff, you're going to continue to find what works if you can stay curious, right? Look at everything that comes up and sort of backfires, actually you're like, well, that didn't go well. All right, what's the learning here, and how can I improve the system? Yes, and it made me think of an inventory system. Might just be a good idea, hey?
Yeah. So you don't have an inventory system?
No.
Holy moly. How do you manage that?
Well, I don't get as much help as I might, wink, wink, if I had one, from other said parties in my home. And because he worked in and around warehouses where everything is inventoried, like normal people. I keep all like with like. So that's how I do it.
Aggie?
Is now an okay time? Okay, so Tina, we were working on admin forms, and you were like, I have a really hard time creating. And then I sent you the forms, and then now we're editing and updating. And I'm thinking that maybe that part is more getting in the way of getting those outer things created, because you're reinventing the wheel seems overwhelming. And one thing that I have done is, when I'm really struggling, I will have my roommate write the 3 things I need to do on a paper, and I take that more seriously if she texts it to me, because it's coming from her, whether I told her to write it or not. So maybe reaching out for help to just get something started, created by you, but just that part will help you with that push at the beginning, because I get really, really stuck at the creating part too. And it's really easy to edit, is what I've realized. It's like I get so stuck on my wall of awful before I start, because I have all this perfectionism in the way about it. Because I'm like, I'm going to use this forever. It has to look perfect, which is not the case. It could be someone else's scribble. But that was just an idea I had after we were talking about all of that. Yeah,
I don't tend to be real creative, and like when you show it to me, I go, "Oh, hey, that's a good idea. This could work. And if we change it just a little bit, then it'll even work. Let's try it out."
So you need someone to probably come in, create the inventory system, show you how to use it and work with it, and then you're gonna run with it. Because I know that there are tools like what's it called? Airtable, which is a database tool that you can create. Like, all right, so if you have this piece of inventory, it'll tell you what kind of box you need if you have the measurements for it. And so it'll cue you to so you can have multiple variables that are contingent upon themselves. I wish everyone could see your face right now on the podcast.
She just saw it goes.
You just put the measurements in and it tells you what box to use.
You can define. So that'd be something even for me, I wouldn't know how to create those parameters, but if you set them up, I can use them.
Yeah. It's called Airtable?
Airtable. Yeah, this is a tool that I've been looking at for like 3 years, but I haven't made the switch.
I use a similar one called Notion that you can do the same kind of thing.
How do you use it?
I use it for organizing my to-do list, my goals, and my all the episode topics and stuff, so that I can because basically Notion is a table of tables.
You shared that one before, I think, with me. Yeah, interesting. All right, let's do this. Let's cut for a quick break, and then we'll come right back. Congratulations to everyone who signed up for our winter coaching and accountability groups. Your journey will begin on January 10th. We are at 100% capacity. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you. What about your journey? Don't hesitate to find out if there is space on our waitlist for our winter sessions by going to the website, or add yourself to the interest list for our spring sessions. Go to coachingrewired.com. Don't wait. Do it now. Go add your name. Our spring sessions are April 8th through June 19th. To learn more and to get your name added to our registration invitation list, go to the website. That's coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Thank you to all of our 158 patrons who help make this podcast possible with their weekly contributions. A special welcome and thank you to Allison F. and John H., who became patrons last week. I truly appreciate your support. And if you love the show and you count on it each week, why not give a gift that makes sense to you? We don't have a pledge drive. This is just a gentle reminder. If you value these podcasts, become a patron at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Check out the perks starting at just $5 a month. And remember, you can join me and a small group of other patrons every fourth Tuesday of the month for a group coaching call on Zoom, if you support us at $25 a month or more. We have canceled our December 24th call based on feedback from the $25 a month patrons since it is Christmas Eve. So our next call will be January 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Whatever your reason for giving and whatever amount you can give, thank you so much. It really does help, and it really does mean a lot to me. Become a patron at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. All right, we are moving on. All right, so Tina, are there other domains other than work where this shows up?
Yes, it can show up in my kind of organization here in my home life. It can show up sometimes in things that are kind of being expected as the other adult in the house that I need to get done. And he may be waiting on me getting it done to get going. And then I can kind of get upset around it instead of just figuring out the steps, like Aggie just said, and doing it.
So the first one I hear is still issues around organization and stuff, right? Which is, to me, sounds very, very similar what you're talking about before. The other are on the expectations from others. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, sometimes when I don't know how to start, I have a very hard time starting. As you say, starting is the hardest part. And sometimes he'll be waiting on me, my husband, he'll be waiting on me to get it started so that he can run with the second part. And he's already running with the second part and still waiting on me because I don't know how to start, or I get like deer in the headlights caught.
Okay. So how much of the challenge is that you don't realize what the first step is? Or that you don't realize that you don't know what the first step is?
Probably 95%.
Okay. So maybe a conversation with your husband around like how maybe he can ask you, or you can share with him what you believe that real first step is, instead of just saying, "Do you know what to do?" And you go, "Uh-huh." It's like the that trick that we all have with ADHD. You hear what I said? Uh-huh. I have no idea what the person said. Like, we think we do, but we don't even realize that we don't until we try to like tell it back to the person that asked us do you know what we just said?
Yeah, a lot of times I just don't know where to start. 95% at least is not knowing the real first step.
Okay. So what are the questions, Tina, that you can ask yourself then to try to get yourself to that first step starting point?
Well, I think potentially maybe working backwards. Saying, if this is what our end goal is, if this is what I want to have happen, what might be the very first step to get to the end? What do I have to do down, 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to number 5? And,
that magical area in the middle that often neurotypical people can just figure out because they can know the first step and the last step and everything in the middle. And they just know how to do that. Right. What I take a slightly modified approach is I think that we can often understand like what done looks like, not always, but often. Right. And we can identify those first maybe couple steps and allow ourselves to trust ourselves that after we do those first couple steps, we'll be able to see what those next few steps are until we get to that. Because that whole idea, and we talk about this in a group, begin with the end in mind, is a great idea in theory, but it's really hard to fill in all the gaps in between, right? So don't be so worried about filling in A through Z. Like figure out A, understand where Z is, and then once you get to B, figure out C. When you get to C, figure out D.
Well, and I feel like I'm pretty good at making corrections along the way that I don't have to have perfect. And that I can make those micro corrections doing something.
Mistakes that come up. How often is it a specific repeated mistake?
Often. Is
that where you get the hardest on yourself?
Oh. And I think I have that from probably the very first day of school.
How did I do this again?
Mm-hmm. Because it's the same mistakes. And if I know for me, not know exactly why, but if I learn something a little bit not in the correct order, ever getting it back to the right place, I have to completely unwind it. And my best example of that was I had a property that I got there the wrong way the first time. I literally had to stop the car, look at the map, get there the right way to ever fix it. Because I went there the wrong way for years.
It's almost like an overgeneralization, which I know what we were talking, I think before we hit record, about that you identify with certain aspects of being on the autism spectrum, kind of Asperger's, right? And that overgeneralization is a fairly common aspect of that. Will just had an aha about something.
Well, I have the same. We were discussing the same. I was like, I really should do something about looking into, if that's something that I should also deal with. But I don't want to because it takes time.
Tina, are there times of day that you find that you lose your shit more quickly than others?
Yes, evening.
Maybe during those times where you have a tendency to lose your cool, you should change the type of stuff you are doing during that time.
Yeah, it would be helpful. And I'm much clearer and better early in the day.
Me too. This is why I don't record podcasts later in the early part of the evening. I try to be done with recording podcasts latest 3 p.m. Because I think I recently released one, or I recorded it, and it's going to be released soon. Where it was much later than I usually do it, and I was not medicated, and you could definitely tell, right? And so it's yes, if I just look at my calendar, there might be this time where it's easier to do it during that time. But I also have to look at myself in correlation with that time of day. Right. And so, yes, the calendar might look like I have time to do it, but I'm not good during that time.
Well, and it's really clear if I've had a really hard executive function day, if I've really burned it, I have nothing left. it's smoke. When it gets to be 6, 7 o'clock. And we still do some kind of old fashioned things here. I generally cook supper every night. I know. We're still doing it.
That's wonderful. And what time do you do that?
6, 7 usually. And sometimes if I've really burned it all up, I try to have a general plan. I don't try to reinvent the wheel every day.
Okay.
Which helps.
What would happen if you had say a 4 p.m. stopping time?
I don't know. I never thought of that. This could have probably a good idea. Who knows what might happen?
I mean, this is sort of like your encore performance, right? Like this is your retirement project that's turning into a pretty successful business. Yeah.
And it was kind of, we just kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't really, really planned, but it's been a great plan. And it has certainly worked with the trivia that I have gathered through my life I had no idea what I would ever use it for. Why should anybody know that stuff about glassware, etc.?
So you kind of have this like encyclopedic knowledge of information.
Yes. Other things that people really don't care about, like Fostoria.
I don't even know what that is.
Someone listening does. Yeah. And fabric. And stitchery and yarn.
You have so many strengths and skills that, if you don't have the right size box, maybe if you can take a step back and be like, I might not have gotten the right size box, but look at all the stuff that I'm doing here. Right. And and I think that kind of, changing our thought patterns. It takes time, practice, and having the right cues to keep reminding us about that.
Yes. And to be grateful that I was able to step out of a 20-year career and have something as some kind of that had been a side hustle that became a legitimate business this year and has just pressed on, changed the address and keep going.
It's amazing. Do you have any idea as far as eBay analytics? Like, where are you in comparison to most eBay sellers?
Because I don't sell commodities, it doesn't rank me, which means I don't sell like iPhone covers or current electronics or that kind of thing because I sell the one-offs. But today I realized that I have sold one of the highest valued pewter items that is sold nationally this year, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that you stumbled into this, because as I was, we're recording this the same day I released the 300th episode, and a lot of the way the podcast sort of came out and the coaching group started stumbled into all of that. Right. And so like, maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe that's like, sometimes we fall into the right things and we make it work.
Yeah. And it's just that I have a fairly curious little mind. And, I saw this great big pewter thing that looked like, I don't know what, like a turkey cover. It's called a cloche. Didn't know. Figured it out.
What's a pewter?
Pewter is.
I was like, are you like using slang for computer?
No. Pewter is PEWTER. It's a metal that was used.
Is like laughing so hard at me right now.
It was used pre-Civil War. You guys think? Well, pre-Civil War, before sterling, and sterling was the rich man's item. Pewter was the everyday person's silverware, plates, even tankards, mugs, all those things.
I have to unmute Roxy just so we can get a snippet of her laughing. Oh man, she's like laughing so hard she can't breathe right now. It's great.
Oh my. So that's what pewter is. Yeah. And I got some spoons last night that may date to the 1700s. I'm not sure. They are really old. Really old.
Roxy, you doing okay? Oh man. It's too bad this isn't we don't release this as a video podcast, because that would just be worth it right there. So Tina, do you exercise?
No.
Are you physically in, like, your body works? Can you get in exercise? Is that something you might be able to add?
Yes. Certain things I possibly need a shoulder replacement. So I tried to do some yoga. That didn't go so well.
Okay.
That was just second thought. I thought, probably not the best thing to put that much pressure on a shoulder. But I can certainly put tennis shoes on and go out the front door.
Is it your dominant shoulder or your...
Dominant.
Okay.
I've just overworked it.
I was going to suggest pickleball because that's what I do. I suggest pickleball to everybody. No, but I think that the exercise too, when you're looking at emotional, self-management, I mean, that's a part of it. I know that, when I look at exercise for myself, Tina, I exercise for my brain and my body benefits, right? On days that I don't exercise, I am definitely more anxious of a human being. Like I just have more anxiety on days I don't exercise. Yeah,
it's a struggle. It's always been a struggle. And I think that needs to be shifted around, and I need some serious accountability, just even for 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. So what would that look like? Roxy?
I just have a word picture I have to throw out, and it is, you are really logical and pragmatic, and you really do grasp like these details in ways that I can't understand. But I picture what you bring to the table as kind of like either bricks or the vertebrae. And I think that I picture the emotional dysregulation is when those bricks or vertebrae are bumping right into each other. And I see the self-compassion and the self-care as either the discs between or the spackle. And I guess I just want to encourage you to recognize the emotional dysregulation as maybe just those things bumping on each other, and let it sort of be a cue to put something soft in between, and to have a whole list of things to grab from. But I would start with what's already in you, and that's the self-compassion piece. That's like, if you just stop and say some of the things we'd be saying to you, I feel like that would go such a long way to help strengthen your wall, your spine, your whatever.
So you guys know there is flexible mortar. For bricks?
Not know that, but of course you do.
There's flexible mortar. There's mortar with a little bit of flex in it, so that it can so it gives your structure just a little more agility. Yeah.
I mean, and Tina, I know that when you start talking about like the stuff that I have no idea what you're talking about, but you get super excited talking about, right? It's like there is a true joy in just hearing you talk about stuff that I don't even understand because of how into it you get. Right. And so you have so many, strengths that you bring. And I know I've said this before, but I really think you would have an excellent YouTube channel talking about this stuff, and it can add to your business, and the added revenue that you make from that can be what you use to hire the people to create your inventories and to do all the stuff that gets you flustered so you can focus on what you're really good at.
I think you're spot on. And I think that may need to be the thing that is the focus for this coming year. We're moved. The inventory's up. The real estate business only has two more items to be complete, as far as, bookkeeping, et cetera, to close out end of year. And so it really is a new chapter. It's a new chapter in time and life. Yep.
Roxy, did you have something? No.
Not exactly, except that kind of goes in line too with creating space by offloading. So there's something about you're creating space by doing the two things we already talked about with self-care and self-compassion. But then you have the added bonus of creating space for yourself to do what you're good at by putting those things in place where you can offload some of the stuff that you don't need to waste your time on, which I think is great.
Well, and possibly talking about the things that people walk by and go, what is that? That's worth, oh my goodness, who knew?
See, that your excitement about that stuff is contagious. And I feel like it's one of those things where people would watch even if they were interested in the topic. And I think, Tina, because this is just who you are, so you're like, this is just what I do. This is who I am. I don't think that you see how special of a gift that is that you have.
Well, thank you. It is so much fun. I went to an auction last night that was in a total hole in the wall, little old building, Tennessee, little scary, just saying. But man, did they have some weird old stuff that I was like, what is that? Who knows how old? Fascinating.
Yeah, you love
just
it.
Fun.
And
all I do is like,
and fascination attracts people, right? Especially us ADHDers, right? Like, ooh, what's that? Oh, I know what that is. That's our cue to take a break. We will be right back. This week on Hacking Your ADHD, it is the second part of a 2-part episode all about planning 2020. Join Will as he's going to show you how he's learned to plan through his planning. Don't just spin your wheels this year. Figure out where you have been and plan where you are going. Have you checked out Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb? Go and subscribe to these short, mindful ways to hack your ADHD. Check out Hacking Your ADHD this week and every Monday. Join Will as he explores ways that you can work with your ADHD brain to do more of the things you want to do. If you haven't checked it out yet, do yourself a favor and go subscribe to Hacking Your ADHD. These are fun, snack-sized podcasts that will cover different ways to hack your ADHD. That's Hacking Your ADHD, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. And you can also check out our other podcasts on our podcast network, ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan, geared towards parents and kid-related issues. Check out both of our podcasts on the ADHD reWired podcast network, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb, and ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan. Have you made it yet to one of our live Q&As? If not, join us for our next one on Tuesday, January 14th at 12:30 p.m. Central. Join me and Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials and Will Curb from our newest podcast, Hacking Your ADHD, as we answer your questions live. We do this every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. If you missed last month's Q&A, then sign up for the next one on January 14th. This is a great way to be a part of the community. To register for our free Q&A, where we'll answer as many of your questions as we can, help you address your challenges and more, go to ADHDrewired.com/events. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. And we'll see you there. I want to thank you for just being a listener for this podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, go ahead and subscribe and tell a friend or family member about it. I appreciate all your support. And if you're looking for a way to talk to others about your ADHD, why not become a member of our private Facebook community? Go to ADHDrewired.com/community. Fill out the application that is at that website. I will then be able to meet you on a live stream on Facebook in the next few weeks or so. If you are interested in our Facebook community, then go to ADHDrewired.com/community and click on the blue button where you can request to join. All right, we are back. All right, so we talked a lot about sort of some of the triggers for that were kind of resulting in creating some of this emotional dysregulation. Talked about some issues around self-care and self-management, including the time that you are working and stopping working, drinking more water, possibly looking at exercise. What else is there that maybe Will, Aggie, or Roxy that we haven't addressed, or ideas that haven't been thrown out there that we can throw out for Tina?
Well, one thing I was thinking about is just, sharing that some of us also, like, everyone has things where they lose their shit over something that means nothing. Like, I think that's also something to be well aware of. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, I went to make a healthy breakfast. My pan was dirty. I went to wash the pan, and there was a cookie sheet in the sink. And then I went and lied down in my den for 6 hours. That was enough to just completely ruin my day. It was a dirty pen and a cookie sheet.
Yes. I mean, it's.
So I had the same thing with cloudy chicken stock. Like I wanted to make chicken stock. It was cloudy and I had to go to bed. It's ridiculous, but it reminds me that the idea that we can tame the ADHD beast with logic is a mistake. We can employ all the strategies, and we should. And I think it helps so much. And I think it makes the distance in between the craziness shorter. But the idea that logically we can just know it and that that's going to fix it is just, it's not true. We always are going to have these things that kick up because ADHD isn't tameable by logic alone. It just isn't. I wish it was. I kind of thought it was going to be.
I mean, Tina, this is also part of why I share the struggles that I personally have, right? It's like, I know the stuff. I teach the stuff. I struggle with the stuff.
Well, and I've always believed that pretty much, and have practiced in life, that most things can be tamed by logic and this can't. Yeah. And I have to sit in acceptance with that and lean in, accept help, ask for support. And in my Western upbringing, that just wasn't as much part of life. You kind of needed to know a lot and be self-sufficient, and that doesn't really serve us in life where we're doing this together.
Where do you see yourself moving forward from here? What do you want to try and do?
Well, I think water, who knew, it could be a big piece of this puzzle.
Let's just all just take a sip of water. Everyone listening, or us right now, sip of water.
Here we go.
Don't spill your water.
Tea. There's the tea. I think that that was a huge realization that could affect this and affect even just how everything works. No pun intended. And and possibly walk around the block, really, and the dogs would love it.
Yeah, when you feel that emotion rising up, go do something physical. Like, get out of the environment, go do something physical.
Yes. My mother would always just kick me out of the house to go outside and play.
So can you kick yourself out?
I can. I kick myself and go outside, do something else.
Tina, thank you so much for sharing this. And I know you're not alone.
And I feel that, and I feel that in the community, and I feel that with my teammates. And thank you guys. Wonderful teammates. Will, Aggie, Roxy, Eric, thank you for everything.
It's our pleasure. All right. Thank you. And we'll catch you next time. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.